Hi, good evening. Welcome to Community Homework's Green Living class this evening. This Green Home series is made possible from a generous support from the Kalamazoo Community Foundation's Love Where You Live grant funding. It's a great environmental fund grant that we so appreciate getting. We'd like to thank the Kalamazoo Community Foundation for their continued support of our mission in making education opportunities like these possible for our participants, their friends, and neighbors. Please remember that you can share this video at any time. It's available forever and ever on our YouTube page or our Facebook page. Tonight's topic is lead in your home. We are going to be joined this evening by our friends from Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing, who are lead experts, and they will be helping us learn about lead in our home, what we can do about it, what we should worry about. Tonight we're joined by T. Collins. Hi, T.
Hi, Jean.
And Matt, I'm going to I knew I would torture you last name, but by T and Matt. During the evening, if you have questions, please type them in the comments program. We're going to ask them some questions. Hopefully they will answer the questions that you might have, but go ahead and ask. And if it's not going to be covered, we'll take care of it for you before the end of the program. T, would you tell us what your job position is at Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing, how you came to decide this is a career path and how long you've been doing it, and a little bit about what Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing provides to our community?
Sure. Well, hello. My name is T. Collins. I am at Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services, now known as KNHS Home Ownership Services. We've been in Kalamazoo for 35 years, just over, and we've been in the community, serving the community to help revitalize neighborhoods through establishing homeowners and also giving them an opportunity to repair their home. One of those big avenues is my position that I hold currently, which is where I come in and help families find lead hazards in their home and put money towards removing those lead hazards found within their home, associated with specifically lead-based paint, which is our topic for conversation tonight. Great,
thank you. And how about you, Matt? Tell me about your association with KNHS.
Absolutely. So KNHS, I have been with the agency for a little over 9 years now. And actually, T and I have been at this a while now, so I'll be able to correct them. We're coming on 40 years this year.
Hot dog. Okay. Okay. All right.
We've been around a while. Mm-hmm. And I came to the agency. I was working in a neighborhood association prior to that and had a long history as a remodeling contractor before that. So I came with a little bit of nonprofit community experience and construction experience. And over the years, I've held a variety of positions, and currently I'm the director of our neighborhood services department, which is essentially all of the physical work that comes out on housing. So our lead program, our roof program, new construction and remodeling of existing homes, vacant homes, all through the department there.
Okay. And not to get off the subject of lead, but if our watchers would like to know about what other services your organization offers, what should they know and how would they contact you?
Our general phone line is a great way to go, or our website, knhs.org. And the main line is 269-385-2916. Is that right, T? I get it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That is our direct line. You can give us a shout between the hours of 9 and 5, Monday through Thursday, and 9 to 4 on Fridays. And that'll be our home ownership center. And also that'll be our neighborhood services. So yeah, good, right, directly our number.
Yeah.
Great. And what kind of services do you supply other than the lead?
So we've got the lead program. We have a roofing program. We are getting ready to partner with the city on some minor repair issues related to code. We have vacant homes that we have for sale and new construction homes. Those are actually assessed via our other department, the Home Ownership Center, where folks can come through. We've got classes on financial readiness and home ownership, and one-on-one coaching on both of those as well, in addition to foreclosure prevention and probably a wide variety of sort of miscellaneous sort of behind-the-scenes services.
Great. Anything you'd like to add, T?
No, that was pretty darn good.
Yes.
And do your services cost money to people who need them, or is it a sliding scale, or what happens if I say, help, I have got lead in my home, I'm pretty sure I have some lead in my home, what are you guys going to do for me?
Sure. If you want, I can jump on that one for a moment now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rock and roll. So when it comes down to lead work, that'll be one direction of services that we offer. So if you qualify for our program, no, there would not be any uphill or uplifting financially that you would have to do. When it comes down to some of our other programs, there may be some expenses there that you may have to upfront, such as I believe that our class for our homebuyer education does have a fee associated with it. And then when it comes down to other things like that, that is that department, that is that area. But when it comes to the generic and the majority of our programs, people can apply and find out if they qualify for things at no cost to them. They can definitely go through the process and finding out what they qualify for and learning about what programs are available at no cost. But when it comes down to other programs and things of that nature, we're at the forefront, letting folks know what costs are, and it varies based off of which program. So that's why I kind of wanted to throw a little bit of tidbit of that.
Right. But I know that we sometimes get calls at Community Homeworks for things that we don't do that you do. And we all need to share this wonderful knowledge and help that we can give to the community so that people know where to call and who does what services and how we can all work together to make it a safer place to live. Did you guys have any kind of special training? I mean, you've both said a little bit about your backgrounds, but did you have to take special trainings about lead or go to lead school? Or
Yes, so there are a variety of different licenses that individuals hold for lead work in general. So there is an RRP license where the focus is renovation. It's individuals who are seeking to do lead work or any other work where the focus point is renovation, not the abatement or the interim control work tied to lead. There's also an additional set of licensing for individuals who want to do the work, which are lead worker and lead supervisor, individuals who want to kind of wield the hammer and remove the window and do those things that are associated with finding the lead and removing those lead. Or making sure the lead that is found is removed, not finding it. Finding it is a completely different licensing in itself as well, which is lead inspector risk assessor. A lead inspector risk assessor is someone who has the licensing necessary to find and evaluate different places where lead is and say as to whether or not it is a hazard according to the scale and the training that they have had. I myself have the lead inspector risk assessor training, which is a training provided by the state of Michigan, recognized by the federal government as well as a comparable course. And Matt also has that same training. He is also certified as a lead inspector risk assessor. Both of us have that training as a standby baseline for us so that when it comes to knowing what products and projects we want to put out to bid and what work needs to be done, we can evaluate what is being presented to us as a hazard and then in turn determine whether or not it's a viable hazard for the standards of our program.
Anything you'd like to add, Matt? It sounds like you've both had a lot of training and vast knowledge of this potentially scary product.
Yeah, I mean, T and I are trained. We have several other staff members at the agency who are either trained as a lead abatement worker or a lead risk assessor, paint inspector. Myself, I've been going to, I've had this license since, for 9 years now. And, we all engage with other partners in the state. We go to statewide conventions with the federal program. Pre-COVID, we would go to national conventions, definitely are, well connected in the industry with other professionals as well, keeping up with the trends and what other folks are seeing in other communities.
Right. I would assume, like many other things, the knowledge is constantly being updated, and procedures of how to take care of lead are constantly being updated and changed and things, so that people who are watching and listening to your answers tonight, before they think they know everything and jump in with both feet, should probably check with you guys to see what rules have changed and what procedures have changed. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are with lead. I mean, the hazards of lead are relatively constant, but when it comes to different regulations and rules, there's a reason they have a refresher course to keep your license, and that's to keep up on changes. In the time I've had my license, we've gone through one major set of rule changes where the standards on how clean a home had to be post lead work was changed quite drastically, which was a good thing. It's making sure that the work is done to a higher standard. But yeah, there are times when standards and rules change.
Great. Who should be concerned about lead in their home, and who should probably not have to worry? You want to tackle that one, T?
Yeah, I would say families who have children age 5 or under should be concerned about lead. I mean, everybody should be aware of it, but those who should be actively concerned about what that looks like in their household are children age 5 or under, particularly because of the habits of children and the way in which they interact with the world. What I mean by that specifically is children are more age 5 or under are not only more susceptible to lead because of their developing and growing bodies and minds, but they're also their habits of putting their hands in their mouth, picking things up and putting them in their mouth, just nibbling on various surfaces that may not be as clean as they may want to be. So that's the kind of thing that I'm throwing out there, as that their habits are what put them at risk, and they're also at risk because of the way that their body's developing and what lead does to a body in that case. So everyone should be aware of the fact that lead is a poison, and it is something that is hazardous to our lives. It is something that is a legacy that we have to try and figure out what to do with as we challenge ourselves every time we look at an old house. But children age 5 or under are the ones who are most at risk, and families who have them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I would also add in people who are pregnant to that list as well. That lead poisoning during pregnancy is also another hot spot for permanent developmental loss.
And what are the major dangers of having lead in your home? Obviously, for the children, maybe first. I mean, eating it obviously is not good.
Yeah, ingesting lead's not good. It's a heavy soft metal that replaces key nutrients and building blocks in the body. So, for example, it can replace calcium in the development of bone, resulting in those bones becoming brittle and weak over time. Similar instance could be tied to neurotransmitters in the brain. It can replace key building blocks in the brain, resulting in behavioral issues or behavioral complications in the future, such as ADD, ADHD, ODD, or even having impulse control issues in the future as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and being a toxin, if the poisoning is great enough, there's low-level poisonings where you're going to see all of the things T talked about, and then you can have poisonings, reach the point where you are truly needing chelation therapy, or to go in and have that lead removed from your bloodstream because it is making you that sick, that ill, dealing with more immediate felt effects as opposed to those long-term developmental shortcomings that come with that low-level poisoning.
But anyone can have those symptoms, right? Or effects from the exposure to lead. Mm-hmm. It's just more dangerous if your mind and body are still developing. But seniors can have a reaction. Middle-aged
anyone can be lead poisoned at any age, absolutely. It's just the developmental portions that obviously hit the hardest in those early developmental years. Obviously our brains are growing and learning all the time, and the opportunity for that to be stunted is really always there. It's just not as great as you get older.
Right. What are the main sources of lead in our homes?
Lead-based paint.
Mm-hmm.
Right there.
Unless
Yep.
you live in Flint.
Yes. Well,
actually,
I
even
mean,
still in Flint.
yeah, actually still
leading
even
cause.
Yeah. 9 out of 10 times lead poisoning happens, it's from lead-based paint. Lead-based paint is created from lead dust. Lead dust is created from the friction points on on windows, on doors, on things of that nature. It kicks into the home. It lands on the floor. Kid crawls through it. It's ingested. It's something that we need to figure out how we've combat it, and how we know the methods. Rather, we need to figure out. We know the methods on figuring out how to do it, but we need to make sure that this money and these resources stay available in the area so that we can keep combating it.
Mm-hmm. And one other, really relevant point to mention with lead paint in the home, I think conventionally people think of paint as, you've got a chip of paint or this physical thing you can see and touch, or they think, all right, maybe my kid is chewing on, a railing or a windowsill. And while that can happen, more often than not, the hazard from paint is that creation of dust, like what T was talking about. You've got a window or a door rubbing, or, even a paint chip that has been stepped on and stomped on, and the dust that you cannot even see is what is really being, more often than not, being ingested and poisoning someone.
Yeah.
How do I know if I have lead in my home? I mean, I have an older home. Am I potentially sitting on horrible lead poisoning hazards?
I mean, you potentially, yes, but don't get freaked out. It's kind of goes with the idea of us having such an old housing stock in the city of Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo has has a majority aging housing stock, meaning what I mean by that is 80% or so has been built before 1980. That's again, majority of the houses built before 1980. Shout out to KNHS Home Ownership Services for working on the new builds. Just throwing that out there. Congratulations, good stuff. But when it comes down to lead and how we fix those issues that we do find, there are a variety of remedies that can be done. The most common is going to be a lead inspection risk assessment, and that's also going to be the most effective. Now, yeah, you can go to Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, and pick up one of those 3M lead check kits, which are in the paint aisle next to the earmuffs and the earplugs and all that jazz. And you break a little vial, you rub it on the windowsill, and you see if it turns red. If it turns red, you've got lead. But that does not give you a definitive answer as to the concentration levels of lead or as to where specifically that lead could be. Could it be the dust that fell from the window opening and shutting, or could it have been blown in from the exterior on the exterior siding of your home? There's a variety of factors there. That's why I say the lead inspection risk assessment, or a LIRA, which is performed by a trained professional that has lead certification, to go to the home and test every single surface, where they go out and scan every painted surface in the home, which can be up to 300 plus scans in the home. And then they put together a report that is maybe 30 pages long, maybe 50 pages long. And in that report, it tells whoever reads it where the hazards are in their home with options on how to go about fixing it.
Mm-hmm. And one thing to note with knowing about lead in your home, to T's point, don't freak out. If you have an old home, chances are there's lead in that home. I have, my house is 1915. There's lead in this home. A home having lead hazards and lead paint are two different things. My front porch, I know, is painted with lead paint, but that paint's in good condition. It's not peeling. It's not flaking. I know it's not a hazard. And that is where having that professional come in with that lead risk assessment paint inspection, they're going to not just identify where is there lead paint in your home, but where are there hazards? Because if you have a wall that is painted with lead paint, yeah, you want to know that, because you might, maybe you're hanging a picture and you're going to create a hazard. But if you're not doing anything to that wall, it's not necessarily a hazard. So that report really is the best way to know what the threat is to you and your family within the home.
Absolutely.
If I were to go to the big box store and buy the little lead kit, and I come home and I rub it on my windowsill, which I have painted several times in the 20 plus years I've lived here, with non-lead paint, how am I going to know if there's lead underneath that paint, or do I not worry about it?
Well, that's where that kind of opens up that can of worms of finding out, is because if there are, as I mentioned, a variety of ways that you can find out about lead paint. Part of that is digging down to find that lead. So on the directions of the 3M lead check, it says kind of peel away to the substrate. The substrate is the lowest part, or the original product there. So if it's a wood windowsill, wood would be the substrate. So they're asking you to peel down to the substrate, which then creates a lead hazard. So you painting over that for the last 20 years have a intact surface, something that is not a lead hazard. But if you go through the process of prying it up, now you're creating a problem. So that is where that may tell you that, yeah, there is lead there, but then it's now you're also creating a situation in which you had something safe and now you're not safe. Which goes to the point of getting that lead inspection risk assessment, because they could tell you this windowsill or window stool is lead positive, but they can then, as Matt said, decipher as to whether or not it's in a hazardous condition or a weathered condition, resulting in needing attention to be repainted, repaired, or removed and replaced.
Yeah. And one other thing of note on those, box store available testing kits is it's not differentiating between anything within that sample. So take a window. If you had paint outside that was chipping or dropping dust into your windowsill, you could come back positive because you're actually also sampling that dust within the windowsill. So even if your paint was not lead paint ever in that window, you could get a positive result from that test strip, because again, that test strip is not necessarily just testing the paint, it's testing everything it touches. So, your neighbor's house could be contaminating your windowsill even. So yeah.
If I think someone in my home has been exposed to lead, what should happen? I mean, do you go to the hospital, you go to the doctor, and then is it treatable if they have been found to be positive for some lead poisoning?
Yeah, so Matt had mentioned chelation therapy. That's when you get to a higher point in where lead concentrations are high enough in your body where they need to do severe interventions, where chelation is like a pill or a fluid that is introduced into your system, in which it then binds with the lead and then dissipates out of your system. But at least to my understanding, and in variation of sorts. When it comes down to short-term methodology, go to your pediatrician and do a first test. And what a first test is going to be a capillary screening. It's similar to a situation in which you do a blood test screening to see what kind of blood type you are, or for that matter, it's similar to that if you were to do a blood sugar testing. You prick the finger, you assess as to whether or not the lead levels are high enough to warrant a then second trip, which the second trip would be a venous draw. And that's when they tap one of the veins and they pull out a sample and then run it through the lab to assess the concentrations and also to verify the validity of the previous capillary test. And the reason being goes back to what Matt had said. Cross-contamination is prevalent when it comes down to lead, because we're dealing with something so small that it's dust that at any point in time, it could throw a result completely way off. For example, if somebody has a capillary test, they're testing their index finger. Well, if that child wiped their index finger out before they left the house on the windowsill, they may still have lead dust on their capillary finger, which when they get that prick in that test, that may result in a very high capillary test, throwing up alarm bells and warnings, which is good because we want to find out where the lead is and we want to make sure we figure the issue out and solve that. But it can throw a bad result out there, throwing a whole bunch of misinformation and then having us chasing to figure out whether or not that's an actual reading. So it's something that you have to do in two phases. First, capillary, then follow up with a venous draw. But the ways to immediately fix that, visit the pediatrician, talk about diet, talk about what are the eating habits currently, what are the current foods that the child is eating, what are the current favorites of the child, what are the current habits of the child, where they sit, where they eat, what are the toys, and then also think about what are the things that they're playing with and what they're doing outside, because again, that could be a culprit for where they're getting lead introduced into their system, which could be a family garden, or it could be a play area or something along those lines outside the home.
No comments, Matt. Okay.
That was great.
If I'm going to do some work in my home, let's say I need to paint the window trim, or I'm going to have my floors refinished. What should I be watching for, and what should I worry about with a contractor?
I'd like to say straight out, know your limits first. Okay. And what I mean by that is because when you're walking into the situation, you may think, oh, I can do this, but remember what the focus of the concern is: lead. So if you have the skill set to patch and repair a wall, great. I'm sure you have the skill set. Go ahead and take care of it. Go ahead and do it. I don't see that being an issue for a lot of folks. However, removing and replacing a window, that can become a headache. That can become a concern. That can create more issues. You may have the skill set to remove and replace that window, pop out the sash after removing the stops and then replace it. Great, wonderful, dandy. You may know how to do it. However, do you have the skill set? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have the focus to make sure that lead dust is not being generated and you're working lead safe? Because those are key things when you're starting to open up territory where you're kicking out lead and starting to introduce lead into your home. Because one of the biggest concerns, or one of the biggest issues rather, that has happened to some people in our lives, in our application pool, is where someone has done home remediation or home work on removing a door, removing a window, or installing something on their own, and then they introduce lead dust into their home, and then a child who lives there is poisoned by lead. You don't want that. Nobody wants that. That's a weight that you don't need to carry. So really think about it. What do you need to hire a lead professional for? What is their job? Their job is making sure that the lead work that's being done is done properly. Not that the window is being replaced properly. You know how to do that. But whether or not the lead itself, the focus of the concern, the hazard that could damage and hurt the future trajectory of your family, is taken care of. And that's where lead work comes in. That's where a lead professional comes in. And that's when you need to hire a lead professional, is when lead is expected or anticipated or believed to be in the home.
Yeah, to sort of double down on what T just mentioned about home remodels, one of the leading causes of poisoning from lead paint in the home is homes that have been recently sort of DIY remodeled, or remodeled via someone who did not have a focus on lead safety. I'd say most of the times I have seen anecdotes of heavy poisoning in a child. If it's related to lead paint dust, it's usually they just rehab the home. And, you can have a home just entirely coated in lead dust. If someone just went through, demolishing walls, ripping out doors and windows in an unsafe way. So at the very least, hiring a contractor with an RRP license, the renovate and repair license, certificate, I should say, from the EPA. And if someone working on your home is not giving you a pamphlet about lead, that should raise a red flag from you right there. If you're in a house older than 1978 and someone is working on that house, disturbing paint, and they have not handed you a pamphlet that says renovating your home and how to keep safe, that should raise a red flag for you right there, because anyone who knows lead safety knows that that's a required document to hand out. And what's important about that document, it's not like we care about bureaucracy and rules so much as that pamphlet tells you about what to be looking for and how to clean and how to, keep your house lead safe or clean during a renovation. And that's the best time to clean is right when the renovation is happening. Because if you move, say someone's remodeling your kitchen and you move back into that space and you didn't clean it for 2 weeks. Well, for 2 weeks, you've been walking through that space and you've now transported that dust all across your entire house.
And so one of the really important things, maybe, I think what I'm hearing you say is that if you're going to hire a contractor to come and renovate your kitchen, find out if they know about lead and how they plan to keep your home safe while they're doing their work, or at least call you guys first and say, I'm going to have work done. Can you come and check what my lead issues are so that I make sure that those things are being covered when I talk to a contractor?
Yeah.
I was just throw out there to check their licensing, like what Matt said. There's as we spoke on a little bit ago, there's a variety of licensing requirements in order to participate in working with lead. Matt had mentioned RRP. That's a solid license that you can get to do and know what you're doing with lead. So make sure they have at least an RRP, because that right there, it has ensured that they are informed of, they've been tested on the understanding on how to make sure they are being lead safe with their practices. So RRP is a solid license to ensure that they are meeting the standard for lead safety. That's regulated by the EPA. If you're looking at making sure that you're hitting a standard of work and things of that nature with the HUD, lead-based paint hazard control program, that the city of Kalamazoo has been awarded, that would be requiring a lead supervisor licensing. And that is a standard in which people have gone through at least 40 hours of education and on-site training to ensure that they know how to not only handle lead hazards on site through abatement methods, but also ensure that they know how to oversee the work being done by other people on site, that there's a solid safety line across the board.
Is there kind of, cutoff date is the only word I can think of, that say my house was built in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Am I likely to have lead in my home, or am I more likely to not have lead in my home?
1978.
Okay.
1978. If your home was built prior to 1978, you have a high likelihood of having lead-based paint in your home. If your home was built prior to 1940, you have a higher likelihood of having lead-based paint present in your home. That does not mean it is a lead-based paint hazard, because that again goes to the point of evaluating whether or not that paint is presenting itself as kicking out dust, causing a hazard. So lead paint, lead itself is a hazard through and through. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is a poison. It causes damage. But whether or not it is presenting itself as a hazard is the fine line that we have to differentiate as to whether or not, and that's why I specify, is we have to differentiate between to ensure that we can put funding into solving that issue if presented with it.
Mm-hmm.
How safe is it for someone, we've kind of talked about it, to think they can tackle
Don't do it.
a lead project?
Don't do it. Just don't do it.
I mean, much beyond the cleaning aspect of cleaning lead, if you're in doubt, particularly if you have someone who's pregnant in the home or a young child, always err on the side of caution, because the damage is permanent and irreparable from lead poisoning. So always err on the side of caution. And, when T said ask for the license, absolutely. I obviously we vet all of the contractors we work with, and, I'll often hear the phrase, oh yeah, I'm lead certified. And like, what does that mean? Show me your license. Well, I don't have it. I'm like, no, that's not. If you had the license, it's supposed to be in your wallet.
Mm-hmm.
And someone might, if you press them, well, oh yeah, I took a class 10 years ago somewhere. That's not sufficient. Asking the questions of someone working on the home will be very telling. Because I also do want to caution, there are people in the industry who do not take lead as a serious hazard. I have personally witnessed people put paint chips in their mouth from an old house and go, lead's, oh, that's a stupid thing. It's regulations. People are being, overly cautious. So you can learn a lot. But yeah, DIY projects, if you don't have a lot of experience, if it's a project that involves disturbing paint, err on the side of not tackling it yourself.
Yeah. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point, Matt. Disturbing is the point. Because again, if you're going to go into a room and repaint the room, that's not disturbing. You're putting paint on top. You're not doing anything too crazy with it. You can paint a room if you feel comfortable with doing that, if you have the skill set to do that. Yeah. But disturbing
it,
Yeah. If you're scraping it, that's creating hazard. That's creating disturbance. That's causing issues. So don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it would need to be, I don't want to say major disturbance. I want to hang a picture. So I'm going to pound a little tiny nail in my wall that's maybe got lead paint 10 coats underneath. Mm-hmm. Am I worried then?
Everything, you could poison a child with that little amount of lead. Actually, it takes that little. But there are I certainly would not recommend someone hire a contractor to, punch a nail in the hole. If you are worried you've got lead in your walls, there are a variety of really just looking up how to clean. Wet cleaning is essentially the main method. So if I were to put a hole in my wall behind me, I would be spraying the spot down with water before I put a hole. I'd be putting a little plastic under it, and doing that and spraying it down and wiping the wall. I'd probably wipe down the wall afterward and, clean up the plastic and call it good at that. But yeah, you don't want to be absurd on a small project. You're not going to call someone out for something that small, but there's still precaution to take.
There are things you can do to make hanging that picture a safe project.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Without calling a contractor.
Yeah.
What about outside? Do I have to worry about the outside of my home, my yard, my garden?
Yeah. So one of the most common places that lead can be found is, as we'd mentioned, on the interior of the home, with the lead being on the window sashes, on the friction surfaces of windows, as well as on window casings and sills and aprons and things of that nature, doors and door jambs and such. But on the exterior of the home, it was common to be used as exterior siding, or not exterior siding, but exterior paint on the siding. The reason and rationale is because lead-based paint dried fast. It was great with good color, and it was a solid product because it was resilient to the weather. The problem is that it is a bad product because it poisons people. That's kind of the root of it, is that it's solid when it comes down to being paint, but it sucks when it comes down to being around other people. So that's when it comes to exterior paint, as what Matt had said, what I had said, with the potential of it contaminating the interior of the home. So if that is causing dust, it could blow right into that window, into the house just the same. So that is a way that the house could have lead-based paint on the outside, if it was painted on the exterior of the home and then over time has aged, and then that dust kicks up and it can blow around in the yard, land very quickly flat right around the drip edge line, which is the most common place, which is going to be along the drip edge of the home. But also, as I had mentioned earlier, gardens. The reason in particular is because in Kalamazoo, we have a variety of homes that, as I had said, are aging. And with that come houses that have maybe burned down or other structures that have fallen in on themselves in the past. That is a way that some houses or some soil can become contaminated with lead-based paint, is that if the home falls in on itself or it is demolished or in that ground. And over time, that does dissipate in all structure, but the lead dust, the lead present still may be there. Now, also, it could be tied to railroad ties. Some people in the community have been using railroad ties as a way to set up raised beds, and railroads have had lead on them on the past, has actually kicked out lead dust in the past and caused contamination on sides of houses in the past. And those railroad ties have become saturated with lead dust, and then as a result, leach that into the raised beds that have collected water from just general rain runoff and such. So you got to be careful with that. Ways to go about avoiding that is to have soil tested, which you can send it to a wonderful lab in Grand Rapids known as GPI Labs. They're wonderful folks. And you can send your soil samples to them to have it tested and see what the parts per million are to see if your soil has been contaminated with lead. Or you can get your soil from a bag and it'll be just as wonderful as any other soil that you have.
Mm-hmm. And what's worth noting on the outside of homes is that the outside of gardens where you obviously, you've got food that you're consuming, bare soil is really the major area of concern. So T mentioned drip lines, gardens, play areas for children, dog runs, say you've got a spot where your dog runs along a fence line. Because if you've got lead in bare soil, that's more likely to get on the bottom of your shoes, the bottom of your pet's feet, and then be brought back into that home where, again, a small child is on the floor, hands in the mouth, hands on toys, toys in the mouth, things of that nature. So really not having exposed bare soil in your yard is a pretty straightforward way to combat that, because even if there is contamination in the soil, if you've got, mulch or even grass or things of that nature that you're not consuming that are covering the dirt, you're much less likely to have that be brought into the home and turn into a hazard there.
So like your soil, your grass doesn't pull the lead out of the soil, and then the grass clippings, if your cat chews on them or something.
No, it's not to a level that's relevant. I don't know, T, you got a better answer than me?
Yeah, not better than yours. Just adding on. I would say that if you're worried about growing your vegetables, that would be where the concern would be, is because if you're gaining produce from that raised bed or from that ground that has been contaminated, the fruit that does bear from that tree, plant, what have you, may actually have traces of lead in it. I can't say that it will have high amounts or concentrations of, but it may actually have enough to be on a warning label where it says it may contain traces of lead. Simple as that. But it is not something that would be so severe that if your cat, as you said, ate it, then they would be sick. So no.
Yeah, and in general, we're on this lovely green living series. I'd recommend anyone gardening at home with an urban garden. Lead is a hazard, but there are probably about 2,000 other hazards of abysmal chemicals that we've had in this paper mill town of ours in the soil over the years. So I highly recommend the bag soil or some soil brought in if you're doing gardening at home.
Start with clean soil.
Start with clean soil.
Right.
I would assume lead aside, I just assume all soil in the city of Kalamazoo and any city in Michigan or the Midwest or the United States is contaminated. Because it is.
How long would lead dust, I don't want to say live because it's not living, but does it ever become not poisonous anymore? If
no,
it just stays poisonous forever and ever, huh?
Yeah.
It makes it even worse.
Right. Well, and that's where, and so when it is in soil, the way that it is kind of recycled, so to say, is that it's mixed in with a whole bunch of clean soil. So it's kind of taking one Cocoa Puff and mixing it in a box of Kicks and shaking it up to see it to dissipate how parts per million it is. Mm-hmm. That would be the comparative on that front. When it comes down to in the home, the abatement and interim control, those are the methods that are used to go about removing those hazards. Yes, the lead may still be dust and things of that nature may be present to a point, but every person who participates in the program, ours, as well as anybody who seeks to achieve lead safety in their home, goes through the process of asking the home to be tested for a clearance. Basically, you don't ask the home, but you go through the process of getting a clearance on the home. And what you do is you have the lead inspection risk assessment. That tells you where the lead hazards are, and that tells you how hazardous those lead hazards are. And then you go through the process of getting the work done, may it be at your own hand or at a lead professional, And then you find yourself in a situation in which the work has been completed, and then you actually get a clearance. A clearance is where someone goes in and tests the key and the most common surfaces where lead would be found: window troughs, window sills, and floors throughout the house. So they go in, they do their tests to verify that the home is now lead safe, so that all the work that told us where the lead was has been done, and then follows up with saying that it is now safe to be inhabited. Yes, there is lead still in the home because you can't make the home lead free, but you can make it lead safe. You can go through the process of solving all those hazards, and that's where that comes.
How do I know if I have lead pipes? I mean, I think everyone in Michigan knows about Flint. How do I know that my water is safe? How do I know that my pipes aren't putting lead in my cooking water, my drinking water, my bathing water?
Yeah.
Well, you want me to take this one, T?
Sure.
I would say, well, first and foremost, the only way to know for sure is to have it professionally tested. The city of Kalamazoo does offer testing for your water. I don't recall offhand the numbers or the exact process for that, but I know you can contact them.
Yep.
And you're going to get some information from them. And if there are elevated levels that are the city's pipes, they will take care of it. If it is your faucet or your internal pipes, that is an area where there is much less assistance to remedy those problems. What was another thing I wanted to say that was very relevant to this subject? You mentioned cooking. I always recommend anyone, your cooking water should be cold water, not hot water.
Yes.
Your hot water tank, if you have a tank, it has a sediment all on the bottom. And if you have lead anywhere leading up to your house, which is likely at some point down the line, it could have been they've already replaced your lead lines 4 years ago, but your tank is 10 years old. You could still have lead sediment in the bottom of that tank because, as we just talked about, it never dissipates or goes away. So always use the cold water when you're cooking.
That's a great tip. It's, and I don't think about it when I go to cook. I just, whichever hand has the pot or the reach or whatever. So yeah, that's a tip I'm going to pass on to all of our folks. How does your organization help people who are worried about lead in their home? So I'm worried. I call you. What happens next?
Sure. So as I'd mentioned, the city of Kalamazoo has received a grant, which is a match grant in which the city of Kalamazoo and the federal government came to an agreement where they would put forth a portion and they would put forth a portion where they would find lead-based paint hazards within the city limits of Kalamazoo, and they would look to find an agency to help officially put that into motion. KNHS Homeownership Services helped with the initial write of that grant, and then as such was asked to be the one who implements that into the community. Hi, my name is T. As I'd mentioned, I am the program manager of that lead hazard control program, and I very much enjoy that. What this process entails for anybody who's interested or fearful of lead and want to know where it's at is that they would get an intake packet. An intake packet consists of the cover letter, which details our guidelines of our program and also all the outlined stipulations of our program, including income requirements. Then the checklist that also is with it, that has the checklist of all the items that are needed for KNHS to assess if you qualify for the program. And then the application, which is the full out details of your home and household, where you say as to whether or not your home was built before 1978, if you've maintained your taxes, and also if you have a child in the home, because that is a key factor. You do not have to have a child in the home for some programs, but our program has a priority ranking for children age 5 or under due to the fact in which, as I'd said earlier on, they are the ones who are most at risk of being poisoned by lead and lead dust. So if you're interested in our program or you're worried about lead, definitely pick up an intake packet that can be found on the City of Kalamazoo's website as well. We will be putting that up on our website and mailing that out to anybody who is interested. And lastly, if you have any questions or direct things that you want to ask, you can reach out to us at lead@knhs.org. That's LEAD at knhs.org. lead@knhs.org. And there you can send a request in to receive an application, or rather intake packet, and then we can mail that out to you, have a one-on-one conversation if you so choose or need, and we can talk to you about the program and the process to that. So the very first step is getting the paperwork, then completing the paperwork, which is a process in itself, because that is gathering all the documents, all the things that you need, all the fun stuff. But it is a process. Check that out. Hey, lead@knhs.org. That's fancy. So yeah, email us. We'll get you the application. And then once you've turned that in, and again, once you turned it in with all of the pieces, we can't just take your name and say, hey, we'll call you. No, you need to do some legwork too. So turn in with the paperwork that goes with it, and we'll reach out to let you know what pieces are needed. And then we play ping pong until we get all that stuff. And then once all that's done, once you've been well educated on the process, once you've been well educated on what lead is and how we're going to fix it, then we come in and find it by paying for the lead inspection risk assessment. The test that we've been talking about this whole time, we take on the charge of that and pay for that up front so that we can find out where those hazards are within the home and then assess as to whether or not we can put money into fixing it or helping you find other resources within the state to solve your issues.
So it's a potential would be a reason to apply. Mm-hmm. A child, an older home, a home where maybe you need some work done. Mm-hmm. And then does your income come into that equation of whether or not you qualify? So it is an income-based program also.
It is. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Our requirements are that you must be below 80% AMI for area median income of Kalamazoo city limits.
Which is probably the majority of people who are living in these older homes.
Mm-hmm. I would say, the majority of a good portion of Kalamazoo fits within that criteria. It's as you said, the majority of these homes, that's majority of our city. Majority of these homes were built before 1980. Majority of the people who live in those homes, as you said, probably qualify for our program. Ergo, 80% of the people may qualify for our program.
Yeah. And you should never assume that you might not qualify.
Correct. Do not push yourself out of qualification. Do not think, oh, well, it's not for me, or, oh, I don't have this, or I don't have that. So what? Get in your application, find out, because the worst that can happen is that we have a conversation and you know what steps you need to take in order to fix the issues that you see. Because the worst that could happen is that's it. you find out more information.
The very worst things that could happen is that you could become lead poisoned because you didn't bother to find out if you have lead or.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. I say that the worst case scenario, and you find reaching out to us, is that you gain more information. But yes, right. The worst case scenario is that you don't.
Yeah.
We have one of our participants asking a question. What are the noticeable symptoms associated with lead poisoning? So how would I know if my child's got lead poisoning other than the blood work?
It can vary. Matt, you can speak on that if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, and here's the tough one. There's almost no symptom that you could notice that you're going to go, oh, that's lead, because they all are symptoms of 100 other things you could be dealing with. In children, the noticeable symptoms, an increase in irritability, loss of appetite, weight loss, fatigue, abdominal pain, vomiting, constipation, seizures. Those are visible symptoms with children, but as you just heard the list, you could have those symptoms and it has nothing to do with lead. So that's the tough thing about lead. It's called the invisible
silent epidemic.
Silent epidemic. Not a lot of folks talk about it, and it's very unless you are physically going to a professional and getting your blood work done or getting the home tested, it's a lot of guessing and speculating.
Well, and it sounds like so many of those symptoms, as you said, could be so many things. But if you've had work done in your home and you didn't check to see if the person was lead qualified or cleaned up properly or anything, and you're having a lot of those symptoms, it's worth going to get your blood work done then, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've all had our fingers pricked. We've all had blood taken from our arms. It's quick, it's easy, it's pretty painless, and it could make a really big difference in your life or your children's lives if you need to have some
Absolutely
help for the poison.
Yeah. And never hesitate to advocate for yourself and your family.
Yeah.
You know, just like any industry, the medical industry is filled with people with a variety of opinions. And, you know, I've certainly heard different anecdotes of people's primary care physician not wanting too many tests or being like, well, you just got tested, or, you know, the Medicaid guidelines, I believe, call for 2 tests by under the age of 5. Well,
the first in 6 months, I think, and then one at 2 years old at latest.
I think it's even up to 18.
18
I know I had to fight when my daughter was barely crawling. I had to fight to get her tested because they said, well, she's not crawling yet, so she wouldn't have exposure.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to say no, do this, even if your doctor is saying no. And also keep in mind let's say you have a 1-year-old and they tested fine and you've since then moved, or you go to a new, the kid now, it's been COVID for over a year and the kid is going to your neighbor's house during the day. And that house is an old house also. If you have new exposure to a new environment, that old test being negative now means nothing. It's a snapshot of that moment in time, which is also worth pointing out. You could have had a lead poisoning that is in the past and you will never know. If you're doing a blood draw and you were mildly poisoned a year ago, but you're no longer exposed to that, you might not show up as a positive result on a blood test because it will work its way out of your blood, not necessarily your body. It rests in your bones in place of calcium and iron, but it will not stay in your blood forever. And that's where the primary testing is done.
Right.
Yeah, I echo that wholeheartedly. Definitely be an advocate for yourself. That's one of the big things that I wanted to touch on because we have such low screening rates within our community. What I mean by that is not screening of the home to evaluate whether or not it has lead hazard within the home, but more specifically to find out whether or not our children are being poisoned by the homes in our community. We have a very low screening rate. We have such a low screening rate that we don't have capillary testing machines regularly at all of our clinics within our community. So we need to ramp up the amount of people interested in getting screening and testing for lead in our children to find out so that we can have the resources available to solve those issues that are being presented. So be an advocate for yourself because no one's going to stand up for you but yourself.
Great. Can we kind of wrap this up by, please, you can take turns, however, defining the words abatement, remediation, encapsulation, and removal? I mean, they're kind of the umbrella of all.
I mean, I would just say kind of, if you want to take that one, I would just kind of just throw out there are 2 different classes of doing the work of lead abatement or remediation, lead remediation. And it is abatement and interim control. And that's where I will just make the differentiation. And then I'll let Matt talk about what all those entail. Because again, there are 2 different distinct ways that can solve a lead hazard. So if there is a issue presented that is a lead-based paint hazard, you can go about it with abatement or you can go about it with interim control. Those are the 2 roads that you could go down. and I'll let Matt kind of dive into that.
I mean, remediation is really an undefined term to some extent, but it's what T mentioned, interim control. That's making something lead safe. It's a method of work that says, all right, it was dangerous and now it's safe, but in 2 days, 2 years, 10 months, it could be dangerous again. We just painted it. That's it. I view that as just painting something. Remediation, you painted it. Abatement means to permanently, and I got to use the air quotes for this word, but these are the legal terms, permanently make something lead safe. What does permanent mean? 20 years.
20 years.
The federal definition of permanent is, as far as lead abatement goes, is 20 years. So that can be removal, encapsulation, or enclosure. Removal, you removed it. It's gone. Encapsulation means you have essentially painted that with a specific paint that is rated to close it in for 20 years under perfect conditions. And then enclosure would be you have completely, covered that with something permanently. You've drywalled over something. You've put aluminum wrap or siding over something. The lead is still there, but you have enclosed it so it is not creating a hazard.
Lead doesn't go away. You just have to make it not a hazard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I am so glad that the two of you and your organization are here in Kalamazoo to help folks who I'm sure need to tackle this problem way more than people are aware of. And hopefully this program will make them think about their homes and think about, being safe and I think more than anything, knowing that it's not something you should assume you can do yourself because it has to be done properly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if it's just, if you're going to hire a painter, you better ask,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you licensed?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I do, before we leave, I want to mention really quick, this is one of the only programs that also helps tenants. This federal program is focused on lead poisoning or preventing lead poisoning in children. And it does not, take the standpoint of homeowner only, as many federal grants tend to do for assistance. Obviously, a landlord still needs to, they own the property. They have to allow this to happen and sign on to that. But if you're watching this and you're a tenant and you're thinking, oh my God, I might have this problem, but the program I don't qualify. No, it is available to tenants as well. So I want to make sure that was out there as well.
That's wonderful to know, because so many programs, as you said, you have to own your home or whatever. And this is just great to know that if you're worried, contact you.
Yes.
I think that's the bottom line. If you have questions, if you have worries, if you have concerns, contact the email that went by or give you guys a call and say, I'd like to see if I can be part of your program.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much. I have learned a lot.
Thank you for having us, and everyone.
Yes, thank you so very much.
Yeah, we like to bring things that are important to our community through these classes and how they can learn more about what they can and can't do. In a lot of our classes, we'll say, this is how, but don't do it, but this is what you should check to be sure that's happening or whatever. And it sounds like that's exactly the information you've given us this evening, is how to do this safely and correctly, and maybe at no cost if you qualify. So that's great. Again, thank you so much. And we'd like to again thank the Kalamazoo Community Foundation. This has been a great hour of information for everyone in town and folks who are watching. Please share it with others. This is not an issue that is tied to anything but the home you are living in. You could be, a unicorn and still have lead in your home. This is not a neighborhood thing. It is not an income-based thing. It's just how old is your home and what work might you want to do in your home. It's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, and that's the leading cause. I mean, you can be lead poisoned from anything from fishing weights to ammunition. There are plenty of anecdotes of folks who've been poisoned from foreign toys. You name it. Lead is out there. It is still legal in many countries and still utilized in not just for paint, but for other things as well. So,
how is the United States doing on banning use of lead in things?
It's banned for residential. If you've ever driven down the interstate and noticed a lot of tarps when they're painting something, lead paint is still utilized in commercial and industrial settings in the United States. And paint companies in the United States make lead-based paint for residential purposes or overseas where it's still legal. So lead paint still does exist. It's just banned in the United States for residential use.
Great. So it's pretty safe to go buy paint at a big box store, and it doesn't have to say lead free or dairy free or gluten free or anything on it. You should be safe buying paint.
Absolutely.
To paint a room in your house or the exterior of your house, either one. Well, again, thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoyed this. If you have questions in the future about this program, you can either send them to communityhomeworks.org, communityhomeworkseducation.org, or go ahead and directly contact our friends at Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing, who probably can solve your problem, because that's who I'm going to call to have your questions answered. So again, thanks for joining us. Hope you had a great evening. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.